Well, good day to you, wonderful people. Zack Weinzierl here. Just had a word for you that if I had to give a title to, I would call The Freedom to Believe. I have some scripture and some things I want to talk about, but first, I want to talk about a book and a movie. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's an old book. I mean, it's not like crazy old. It's just pretty old. I can't remember the guy's name. He's a Frenchman. He wrote a book called The Little Prince. And a few years ago, Netflix made a movie off of the book. And both the book and the movie are excellent. I would encourage you to either watch the movie or read the book. It's powerful. And really what it's about, I might have talked about this before in a video a long time ago. So if you've heard me talk about this, sorry, not sorry. But the main overall thing in the book is about being like a child, essentially. And it's about looking through the eyes of a child, the wonder, the imagination, the belief, just the belief, and not necessarily in anything, but just like the belief of a child, the innocence. And it's this really powerful story. I can't actually watch the movie or even read the book without like crying. And I've seen the movie multiple times and read the book a couple times. And it's powerful. I would encourage you to check it out and watch it. And this is kind of where some of this is coming from that I want to share on the freedom to believe. And that's this idea that, not really an idea, but like when God created us, he created us as sons and daughters when he's brought us into his family. And like he wants us to believe him, right? Like belief versus unbelief. And belief is that like he's good, that he's who he says he is. And anything that doesn't line up with believing him and his word and what he says to you or what he says in his word, it would be unbelief, really. And I think if we're honest, we would all be able to look at our lives, even now, and say that there are areas that we know we don't fully believe him. And not that we would want to openly admit that we don't believe God, but like if you look at the choices you make, the steps you take, I can even say for myself, there are areas that I don't have faith in God for certain things, or to step into certain things, or to walk some stuff out. And one, I want to say that there's grace in that like he understands, and he wants to take a step-by-step, breakthrough after breakthrough, to step into greater faith and to have that mature and grow. But that's the thing is, there's this childlike faith and this freedom to believe that I believe he wants to remind you of. At first I was going to say that he wants to give you, and then I just had the thought, he doesn't want to give it to you because you already have it. The freedom to believe him, and to step into that and to be like a child. And you actually already have it. He just wants to remind you of it. So that's what this is. So first I want to look at Matthew 18, if you want to turn to it. Matthew 18, verses 2 through 4. And I'm reading out of the Passion Translation. So Jesus called a little one to his side and said to them, "Learn this well. Unless you dramatically change your way of thinking and become teachable, and learn about heaven's kingdom realm with the wide-eyed wonder of a child, you will never be able to enter in. Whoever continually humbles himself to become like this gentle child is the greatest one in heaven's kingdom realm." The specific line that I love is, and learn about heaven's kingdom realm with the wide-eyed wonder of a child. Like that's his desire for each of us, that, there's salvation, there's entering in, and, we believe to enter in. You have to have faith to even say yes to him, really. But it doesn't stop there. There's like the life journey of being like a child with wide-eyed wonder, to learn about his kingdom, to grow, to mature. And this kind of comes from that Little Prince book. It's not a quote, it's just something that's sort of in it that I got out of it a lot. And one of the things that they do say is kind of talking about the difference between children and grown-ups. And not like grown-ups are the enemy, but one of the lines is like, grown-ups, they forget. And that's really the problem, is like when we grow up in this world and in just the world system, what happens is we forget. And that can even be true if you get saved, and there's that joy and the freedom and all of that happens when you like accept Jesus and everything changes. Oftentimes we get back into life and, you're still a Christian, you're still doing things. Your life may still be drastically different, but eventually, not that it has to be this way, but what we see a lot is, and I've experienced this, is like you lose the joy, you lose the wonder, and everything becomes like a job and rigid and religious, really. But this is what the book talks about, is that grown-ups forget. And so this is kind of something that I've meditated on a lot. And because, the Bible talks a lot about maturity, and we're expected to mature. And if we stay as babies in Christ, and Paul talks about that in numerous places, like First Corinthians 3 is one of them, where like he talks about like he wishes he could give us the deeper things, but like they were too immature. They still needed milk, like a baby. And so, we're expected to mature. That's a part of this journey of being with Christ and being in him. We're expected to mature. So that's a part of it, absolutely. But what I feel like the mistake we make is, that I've made, and I've had to learn a lot in, and still am learning, is that maturity does not equal becoming callous. And I feel like most of what we experience because of being in this world system and all of that, and a lot of what it is in our Christian walk is actually like purging ourselves of that and becoming fully like kingdom minded and all of that stuff. But that like we mature, we grow up, we get older, we learn, we grow, but we become callous and we lose the childlike wonder. And the Lord's way is completely different than the world's way. I mean, that's obvious, right? But like we don't believe that always. We might believe it when it's said, but when it comes to our actions and our choices and our lifestyle, we don't always believe it. And you can disagree with me, but I'm right. Like the world's way and God's way do not line up together. And when we grow up, we mature, we're told to grow up. I mean, all of us can probably have memories of points in our life where, you have to grow up. You're faced with situations and you have to mature. There's a maturing process and it's natural and there's a good side to that. But the world's way of maturing often brings callousness, a numbness, even if you're not careful. And that maturing and the wisdom it brings, but it's the world's wisdom. And I want to talk about that for a minute. So now go to 1 Corinthians 3. And I'm still reading in the Passion. 1 Corinthians 3, verse 18 and 19. So he's actually talking about spiritual maturity in this chapter, but I'm just reading this part. So this is about wisdom, and I'm relating it to the childlike faith that he wants us to have, where we just believe him. We believe him at his word. There's no suspicion or doubt or unbelief. We just believe him because we're like a child, and we just have this heart that says, yes, God, we believe you because we know you and you're good. So 1 Corinthians 3, 18 and 19. He says, this is Paul. He says, so why fool yourself and live under an illusion? Make no mistake about it. If anyone thinks he is wise by the world's standards, he will be made wiser by being a fool for God. For what the world says is wisdom is actually foolishness in God's eyes. So that's a powerful thing to consider. Like, how many times in our life do we make decisions based on what we have learned in the world system? How many times do we not step out in faith with things God is showing us or dreams he's giving us because the world's wisdom, it doesn't make sense with? And I want to make this distinction. The world's wisdom and God's wisdom are not just on separate paths, and it's like you just choose to take a different path. God's wisdom and the world's wisdom are in completely different dimensions. They don't even touch each other. The world's wisdom is foolishness in God's eyes, what we just read. God's wisdom, to become wise in God's sense, is to become a fool for him. That's what that just said. He will be made wiser by being a fool for God. When you step out in faith in the Lord with what he's given you, with what he's showing you, and like a child just believing him, it will look completely foolish. It is not even in the same realm as the world's wisdom. The world's wisdom is based on the world's system. It's based on everything that is just in the natural. It's based oftentimes on fear, and nothing based on fear, any decision based on fear, any system built with even a bit of fear in it, it's trash. It's not worth it. And when I say that, all of us deal with this at times, and all of us probably have things even now in our lives where decisions we've made or situations we're in right now are decided by, or we're in that situation because of, world wisdom and not having had that childlike faith in God and stepping out and stuff. So it's this freedom to believe he wants to remind us. Like, we are invited to become like a child, where we believe him, where we don't have this suspicion, this callousness, this numbness. That's not what he has for us. He has a complete freedom to step out with joy. And, stepping out in faith in the Lord doesn't mean you're going to be comfortable. In fact, it probably most definitely means you're going to be uncomfortable. But there's a freedom and a joy in him that there's no comparison to. But the thing is we often will consider what we're doing or what we see other people doing, and we're so afraid of failure and we're so afraid of looking dumb that we forget that to be wise in him looks foolish oftentimes. And that doesn't mean making dumb decisions and doing ridiculous things and blaming it on God. But like, when he shows you to do something, it doesn't matter what it looks like. It doesn't matter what anyone else actually says. And now there's wisdom in having accountability in relationships, but even people that you trust in your life, they may not see it. But if you know God is speaking to your heart, and he's showing you to do something, it may look foolish to everyone around you. But if you know it's him and you know his voice, because we know his voice, it doesn't matter if it looks foolish, because his way is wisdom. His voice is wisdom. And yeah, so there's just a freedom. He wants to remind you of a freedom to believe. Hopefully this made sense. It made sense to me. But there's a freedom to believe. There's a freedom to step out, and it doesn't matter what you're facing in the natural. It doesn't matter what things look like around you or what it feels like or what people are saying. There's a freedom to believe him, to believe he is good, to believe he is who he says he is. And it's a beautiful thing. And there's a childlike wonder, and that's where the freedom comes from. It's like this heart posture that, like, he's just good and we can just trust him and believe him because he's ridiculously good. So I want to invite you to press into that, a freedom to believe. And then when it comes to that faith stuff, it's not just a wonder for wonder's sake. James 2:17 says that faith without works is dead. And that faith, that belief in him, it requires action. It requires a follow through. It requires works to come out of that. And yeah, it can be scary, but faith in him, freedom to believe him, it's worth it. So be blessed. Have a wonderful day, evening. Have a wonderful week. Have a wonderful